Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Lloyd and I source cars for people on a professional basis. Although most of the cars I source are between £1,000 and £5,000, very often I've been asked to show something a little bit cheaper on the channel, and so I came up with No Budget Reviews, the series where we look at cars that you can buy in good condition with an MOT for under £1,000 and you can enjoy driving. We don't film this in an expensive manner, we don't use separate microphones, we don't use dual head tripods, we don't even use a DSLR, but we do have a lot of fun. Well, viewers, in March 2021 we filmed a Volvo 940 Celebration Estate, and it's now June 2022 and we're filming another Volvo 940 Celebration Estate because, well, why not? This one is a manual and it is dark green and it has the original spec wheels on it. The 940 was a very significant car for Volvo in the 1990s. It carried on from the tradition of things like the 240 and the 740, obviously eventually replacing both of them, and was like a sort of more traditional big brother to the 850, and then like a sort of cousin of the 960, which was much more sort of higher spec and high tech, although sharing some components with it. This is a really late one. It's a 1998. I think registered in January 1998, when production of these finished in February 1998, so a very late one indeed. These are the original spec alloy wheels. I can't actually remember on these whether the side repeater should be clear or not. I think these tail lights are actually off an earlier model. I think they've actually been changed for the ones with you know, the coloured lenses. I think these actually should be the clear ones, like on the last one we filmed at this stage, but I could be wrong about that actually. It says turbo on the back. This is just for light pressure turbo, 135 horsepower. Of course, with the side impact protection system, some bars in the doors, not SIPS bag yet. That was, I think, first introduced on the 850 or V70. Enormous boot in one of these, something like 700 litres. And of course we've got all kinds of things, Volvo bags and, you know, high visibility jackets and all that kind of stuff. 7 seats would be under here if this car had them. Obviously this one actually doesn't. It was an option, but incredibly good space for loading up your things, which is why people bought Volvo estates back in the day. Enormous big space for putting anything you wanted, really. You could put an accessory sort of where those two things are in the roof, to clip a dog guard in or something like that. In fact, this car actually does have a dog in it sometimes. Typical story with this car, it's had 2 owners from new, and one of them fitted this roof rack. Loads and loads and loads of sideboard on the tyres. Typical kind of older Volvo construction with rear wheel drive and the famous red block engine. Beautiful colour, very much to my taste. All I need now is a beige leather interior. Unfortunately the Celebrations don't have that, but we do have wood, and we have sort of half leather. We'll just move the thing that way, and some Volvo rubber floor mats, just like my mother's old 240 used to have. Very nice, viewers. Headroom's not quite as much as I would expect actually. I'm only sort of 5'11". I'm nowhere sort of Scandinavian in my proportions, and yet the headroom and legroom aren't quite really as generous as I'd expect. They're pretty good. I mean, don't get me wrong, but they're just not quite as crazy as you'd expect from a big boxy Volvo. Never mind though, we do have the integrated child seat, but it's highly illegal these days. You can't have this in a new car, but very handy. 3-point seat belt, of course. It's very neat how that sort of stows itself away. There's even like a little headrest for it there, which is very good. You can fold the seats down, of course. I won't do that. It's not necessary, really. You can imagine how that is. These head restraints are very, very typically Volvo of the time. I think first coming in the 240 series. Just so many little touches here, like the fact that on the front and rear doors the handles are actually recessed in here. That's an old thing, so you don't get dug into the leg by the door handle that opens the door, which is very thoughtful, really. Lumbar support down there, very comfortable seats. We'll get to that in a second. I mean, even ones at the back, to be honest, are very comfortable, and you can slide your feet just under here. Of course, we've got the Volvo 940 Haynes manual. It came out in 1990. Bizarrely, the 940 overlapped with the 240 and the 740. The 740 I think was sold until 91 or 92. The 240 until 1993. Early ones of these would not have had a driver's airbag. This one does, of course, being a very late one. And this gearbox, there were various gearboxes available with the 940. This is the later type, but actually has reverse down to the right, as opposed to being up to the left and engaging with a collar, which is what the earlier ones would have had. Some of the 940s had a 4-speed manual with overdrive. That was one I remember principally being the Wentworth models, which was sort of a more luxurious specification, sort of I think towards the middle of production. Very, very, very clear instruments. We've actually got a Viking long chip in here because it's a Volvo. And my favourite, just wonderful. Same as on a 740, really. Even this radio is in the same kind of style as Mr. Richardson's 740 you would have seen on his channel and on mine, because I've also driven that one on No Budget Reviews. My mother's 240 also had a very similar radio to this. It wasn't the same, it was just very similar to this. And of course you've got an appropriate 1990s cassette in here. You've got the Portishead album, which includes Glory Box. That's a wonderful, wonderful track. Heated seats, of course, because it's a Volvo. Later one though, because it's got 4 electric windows. And the driver's one's even got an automatic down feature. Very, very fancy. Door pockets aren't nearly as big as I'd imagine. It's probably because of all the reinforcing that's in this door. Right, we'll see if my secret mission documents go in the glove box. Oh, and we've got a proper mag light. Yes, viewers. That's someone who cares about their own security. Just see if we can get those in there. Oh. Oh. No. Oh, no, viewers, no. Help. Why is it when I always get excited about cars that they don't fit the secret mission documents in the glove box? Dear. Right. Ooh, there's a space in here for the mystery machine and everything else you could imagine. This ashtray is not particularly well suited for the auto models. That gets in the way of the auto transmission lever. But with manual one, it's just fine. Those have heated mirrors, and that's presumably for the instrument dimming. And some front and rear fog lights, I imagine. I think that is for both of them. Just very typical kind of Volvo bits. Very similar again to a 240, these particular stalks are. A 960 has a very different type of interior, and actually the front and rear of the car is fundamentally different in many ways. There is a review of the 960 on True Jacket Reviews we did in May 2019 actually. I'll put a link to that in the description below. Right, let's take a look at the red block engine. So the famous Volvo red block engine, you can see actually straight away why it's called a red block engine, because the block is red. First introduced in the mid-70s, and I think it was a Volvo 240, the first car I had this all with 244, 245 would have been at the time. But this was the last car with this engine. By this stage, the Volvo white block, which had come out, I think it was about 1990, 91. First car was actually the 960, which this shares quite a lot of components. So plenty of room for that straight 6 to go in here, as well of course as the PRV V6 that was in some of the very early 960s and also in the 760. Really easy to find everything. This has had the cam belt done in 2022. This particular engine is a B230FK. Lots of specifications that we will go into a little bit later, but loads of room to work on everything. No real issue with stuff. An enormous ABS pump made in the USA for some reason. The strut top mounts on these do go. These look absolutely beautiful though. In fact, this whole car is in very good condition. The red block does need its cam belt doing quite regularly. It's quite an easy job on these actually, it's not difficult. And it's a non-interference engine if there are any problems like that, so that's another advantage of these. 2 litre and 2.3 versions of it were available. This is a 2.3. And there's this very strange kind of way of filling up the screen wash, which just is there. And this one's got a cap there. Maybe if you modify things you could actually have 2 screen wash bottles, but with the batteries there, mixing electricity and water is a very bad idea, perhaps not. And of course we also have some headlamp wiper action, because it's an old Volvo. This one is a bit cracked though, that will be replaced very soon. Right, I think it's time to go for a drive, viewers. Lloyd Vehicle Consulting stickers, t-shirts and mugs are available by clicking the link to the Google form in the video description below. Right viewers, feel very at home in this indeed. So the variants of the red block that were used in the 940, at least in this country, were a 2 litre 8 valve of 111 horsepower. There was also a turbo version of a 2 litre 8 valve engine developing 155 horsepower. The 2.3 8 valve engine developed 131 horsepower, later 116 horsepower. There was also a 16 valve version of that engine, which I think developed 155 horsepower. When we get onto the turbos, there was a 2 litre 8 valve turbo, 155 horsepower. Then there was just a turbo, which was the 2.3 16 valve, and that developed 165 horsepower. Later on, that single turbo version of a 2.3 was replaced by a high pressure turbo and a low pressure turbo. This is the low pressure turbo version, which develops 135 horsepower. But the fastest version of all was the high pressure turbo, which 170 horsepower. Given this car weighs somewhere in a region of 1.5 tons, I think the high pressure turbo would be possibly the way to go if you wanted the most performance. Mind you, it seems very torquey and gets up to speed quite easily for something like this. Seems like a sort of big lazy engine, and the car feels very stable. The seat's incredibly comfortable. Obviously it leans a lot in the bends. The ride is very soft in this car. It's very soft. I'm also getting a lot of wind whistle from the roof rack, which is interesting, shall we say. But certainly this is well up to the standards that you'd expect for very long journeys, although there's no cruise control in here. I think that was on the 960. That has a completely different rear suspension setup. This is not leaf spring or anything like that, but it can't match the carbon fibre that was in the 960 estate after the facelift, and those cars feel very different to drive from this. This is far more like traditional Volvo saloons in the States, like the 740 and the 240, where you don't really want to push these cars too hard because they'll just roll. It's perfectly safe and everything like that. I mean, it's not going to get you into much trouble if you drive conservatively, but they're not as involving to drive as something like an 850 or a 960, but we're both on sale at the same time as this. Steering is accurate enough, it's very light. Obviously some of the earlier 240s didn't come with power steering, this certainly does. But the overall feeling is just one of immense relaxation and comfort. And I understand why somebody would most certainly want to drive one of these for a long time and keep them. The trim levels available on the 940 were S, L, SE, GLE, Wentworth, Torslander and Celebration. I think there might have been just a 940 base model as well. The ones to go for if you want your luxury are things like the Wentworth and the GLE. There was also an automatic available. It was, I think, 2 completely different automatic gearboxes available depending on the year that you went for and the specification. Certainly, if you're really into this kind of traditional feeling Volvo, then this is exactly the sort of thing that you need. Let's try a turning circle actually, let's try that. So that's like, oh, it's very good, viewers. It's very, very good. Doesn't have the same induction roar as the old 2.3 red block had on my mother's 240. I think it's because it has a viscous fan and this probably doesn't. You don't have that same sort of roar, which is what I always remember about the older Volvo. Certainly Mr. Richardson's 740 has that. In terms of sort of problems you have with these cars, I spoke to Mr. Coleman, a rubbish mechanic, who used to own the 960 that we did on 3 Jacket Reviews in 2019, and he just told me that there just aren't really many problems with these cars. They don't rust particularly badly, the engines are very reliable, they're a non-interference engine. Obviously there's wear and tear items to replace, it's just like anything else. But a lot of these cars will have been with owners for a long time and they would have tried to look after them. You see you know, mileages of 200 to 300,000 regularly on these, and that's nothing to be worried about at all as long as the car's been properly maintained. I don't know why I haven't actually ever bought one of these myself for any viewers. You know, it brings me back to a time, of course, of my youth and things like that. The fuel consumption might be a bit of an issue for some of you. And of course there were some diesels available, but as usual, due to controversial government legislation and all kinds of other reasons, we don't talk about diesels on this channel. So viewers, the Volvo 940 estate, is this a car that you should consider for your hard-earned budget up to £1,000? Well, we're being a bit, shall we say, flexible today with our budget. This car cost over £3,000 actually recently, but you can get them in far less good condition for under £1,000 still. This car's only got 91,000 miles on the clock, so it is actually reasonably valuable. They are going up in price, so it's right at the end, possibly, of a time when these are still relatively affordable for no budget reviews money, with much higher mileage on them in worse condition. But if you want this space, you want this nostalgia, and you want the legendary red block engine, then this would be a cheaper option than, say, something like a 240. Those are, well outside the sort of no budget reviews territory now. Anyway, thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching this episode of No Budget Reviews. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, leave a comment below. It all very much helps out, and we'll see you again soon for more inexpensive motoring.